Herman Pilnik was born in Stuttgart, which is my wife's family's home. Pilnik was born in Stuttgart on January 8th, 1914. He passed away November 12th, 1981. He became an international master in 1950 and a grand master in 1952. He was a candidate in 1956. Another World War II refugee in the 1939 Argentina Olympiad. And so he moved to Argentina along with quite a few others. We already mentioned Najdorf. And Pilnik won the Argentinian Championship in 1942, 1945, and in 1948. He traveled frequently and ultimately settled not in Argentina, but Venezuela. And there he taught chess at the Caracas Military Academy. And that's where he passed away in 1981. Well, we have e4 and c5, the Sicilian defense, knight f3, d6, d4, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, an open Sicilian, knight f6, knight c3, and as mentioned when we saw the Najdorf game, Najdorf's variation was Bobby Fischer's favorite. Bishop e2 is Opachenski's variation. That's named for Karel Opachenski. e5, knight b3, bishop e7, both sides castle. This is the traditional line. Bishop e3, bishop e6, pawn f3. Marked inaccurate. Usually we see queen d2 here. Knight b d7, pawn a4, rook c8 to the half-open file, pawn a5, queen c7, king's rook to d1, king's rook to d8, and the most common continuation is to get the queen out of the rook's line of fire, queen e1, and black plays queen c6. Coming back, Pilnik, following a sort of Yugoslav theme, played f3. Queen c7 here. Queen's knight to d7 is the usual move. Let your bishops and your knights lead in the fight. Queen c7. Queen e1, very normal, but the most frequent is knight d5. I was going to say back here, usually in these Sicilians, when you push the f-pawn, you come to f4. So even here, you can say, oh, I should have played to f4. Yeah, it gets a star. f4 is always going to be a move in these lines. Well, queen e1 was played. Now knight b d7. You'll often see b5 in these lines as well. b5 with the idea of b4. That also gets a star. But queen's knight d7. Rook d1. Getting the rook on the open file. Queen f2 being called for. And again, I'll just mention that f4, you've seen me play f4 so many times myself that I just want to emphasize that's always going to be on the table. Of course, that gives this bishop quite a bit more scope, doesn't it? Really feels like that's what he should have played to begin with. Rook d1, now b5, rook d2. And normally you want to reserve that square for your queen's knight here, or that's actually your king's knight, isn't it? That's the knight that came here, here, here. You normally want to save the d2 square for the b3 knight. Let's put it that way. So queen f2 might be a better option. Well, it says that's inaccurate. And did I mention f4 is always an option? Because I actually was going to mention that, and then the bot pointed it out. I should have called it. Knight b6. Oh, excuse me. Did I skip a move? Oh, that's right. I forgot to put the rook back. So after rook d2, knight b6. Yeah, b4 is pretty thematic. It kicks that knight away. And after knight d5 hitting my queen, I have to take it. After bishop takes, pawn takes, and now knight b6 can be played with the super attack here. So bishop takes the knight, queen takes the bishop, check, king h1. And then we cement our b-man in place with a5. Coming back, what was actually played was knight b6 here, and now queen f2. Queen's rook b8, knight c4 is looming, but bishop took and rook took. Knight d5 here, knight takes knight, pawn takes knight. So bishop d7, and now pawn f4. Bishop f6 gets a question mark. So rook b8. Let's talk about this move. It discovers control of a5, right, so I can push forward. But, to be honest, here's another place where you could play that b4 move. Not liked, though, in this example. Anyway, bishop f6 was played. c3 blunts the diagonal. Pawn takes pawn might be stronger. And after bishop takes pawn, then knight d4 can be played. It says pawn takes pawn, really? Give your opponent a passed pawn? c3 was played. Now rook b8 is played. That's funny. Rook e8 being called for, although it feels like you could tell him, since you didn't take my pawn, I'll take yours. I get a check mark there. Well, rook b8, pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, and knight d4. Pawn g6 here, pawn a3, pawn a5. Right. The idea of this is to occupy the open file, and we'll just put our bishop back here on in the pocket. a5 was played. King h1, right. So this actually forms a battery. It's unusual to see a pawn as the spearhead of the battery. And the idea is to add a defender to c6. So the pawn, right now the pawn is defending, but it's got two attackers. So you cannot play the knight here. But by playing bishop f3, you now add an additional defense to that square, so the knight can come to c6. Now, really, another thought that caught my eye was rook c2, getting in line with the queen. I get a check mark there. But king h1. b4, c takes b4, a takes b4. Now rook c2. And now it seems it's inaccurate, but to me this seems very reasonable to attack the queen. And this too, just like earlier, this facilitates knight c6. This adds another piece supporting that square and will facilitate knight c6. So I'm not sure why that's marked inaccurate. Let's look at the a takes b4 line though, since it's marked there. Presumably we're going to take this. And is there a trick here maybe? Instead of knight c6, I mentioned a moment ago knight c6. Can I play knight e6? This interests me, right? This pawn is pinned to the rook. So this square then is available to my knight because of this battery. You can't take it with the pawn because queen takes rook checkmate. What do I get for knight e6? Inaccurate? Ah, thumbs up. It changed it. Right, so you can't take here because of checkmate. For that reason, you'd have to take with the bishop. But then white's attack comes to a screeching halt because rook f4. And I'm going to pick up that pawn. Well, actually, he can desperado. That's check. But doesn't this look strong? Oh my goodness. You can't move the queen because you're back ranked if you do, right? It's a back rank mate if you move the queen. For that reason, you'd have to block. Okay, a lot of heat from both sides in that line, that knight e6 line. Okay, come back to what was actually played, rook c2. Ignore that inaccuracy. It seems like a good enough move. I mean, you got to do something about this attack. So apparently pawn takes pawn was more precise, but all right, here we're at point 2. Pawn takes pawn is at, what's that, point 4. It's hardly meaningful at our level. Rook c2, good enough. Queen b6, knight c6. Pawn takes the A-man. B3, hit the rook. Force him back to D2. And then you get to take the knight. Yeah. Oh, no, because he'll queen. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I rook take. Oops. And after takes, I'm still picking up the pawn. Back, back, back. Bobby with pawn takes the pawn. Queen takes the queen. I was expecting pawn takes back. And queen takes the queen, rook takes the queen, now pawn takes the pawn, rook a8, knight takes the bishop, pawn takes the knight, and here rook c3, defending the pawn. I was actually expecting a hit on my bishop with rook c7, and that's what the bot calls for. Rook b2 hits white's bishop, but not liked by the bot. I should mention that this is also a good time to consider bringing your king into the game. not too soon to start activating this guy. And it wouldn't hurt to get off this back rank so your rook isn't tied to the back rank. I get a check mark for that idea. Rook b2 is played. Now rook c7 and bishop f5. Do not capture the rook here. That would be a mistake. After rook takes your bishop, you'll have to defend this pawn. And, that's dead equal, isn't it? So bishop f5 was played. Now g4 hits the bishop. So the idea of bishop c4 is to threaten pawn to d6, and then this f-man comes under super attack, a discovered super attack. Pretty clever move bishop c4 would be. And it's a bit counterintuitive because you have to move behind a pawn. Well, Pilnik tries g4, hitting our bishop. Bishop e4 check, gains a move, forking the king and this d-man. And so bishop f3 interposes against the check, and x-ray defends the d-man. Bishop d3, white's under some pretty strong pressure here. He tries d6. Passed pawns are meant to be pushed. So why is that getting a question mark? Your guess is as good as mine. So rook d8 has to be played here to blockade. You don't want to grab this A-man back here. This pawn is way more valuable. And if you come here, it's over. Even though I can grab a rook, promotion time. It's over. Actually, I can even sacrifice my rook here, can I not? Let me see if I can figure... Oh, ho, ho! Number 4 on the knight. Number 4 on the knight. And the point is, now I'm going to give you check, and I'm going to work you to a dark square where I fork your king and this rook here and get back my rook. Like even here, if you play king f8, I think I just fork you here, right? And if you play to a light square, my bishop's going to come in. So don't be grabbing that guy. This is the guy that you have to worry about. So rook d8. Rook e1, rook takes pawn. Perhaps better is e4. Play that first, and then after the bishop moves, then pick up this pawn. Bobby goes, oops, that was a mouse slip. I lose more games like that. I'm going to take that, and somehow my rook ends up there. I lose so many games like that. So Bobby plays rook takes pawn, rook takes pawn. Rook f6, rook e3, defends and attacks. White really doesn't have any good moves. Maybe a rook e8 check was necessary. I get a star, but the rook's got to come back to e3 sooner or later. The bot's idea was rook b7 here, putting the question to this rook, defended by the bishop here. There are no good moves for white. He tried rook e3. Well, rook takes f3. Oh my goodness, Fischer. You drive me crazy. What a move. Gives up the exchange. Don't look for any tricks here with rook c8. That's just a mistake. After king tucks away, it's not going to work well for you because, right? And then black just goes up a full bishop. So don't get cute. As you know, it's when you try to get cute that things tend to get ugly. So bishop e4 here anyway, but the difference now is he can defend with rook takes f7. But what do you do to a pinned piece? You attack it again, ladles and jelly spoons. Rook f2. He tried rook f8 check, king g7. But with this pin, white has lost all hope. And so he resigned. King g7, satisfying the time control, by the way. He probably would have resigned sooner, but the seconds were ticking off. He wanted to make sure Bobby wouldn't lose on time. So as you can see, there's nothing white can do to save this. When he attacks my bishop, I'm not even going to necessarily take this right away, although that should be winning. But I want to keep the pin in place. Generally, you don't want to capture the pinned piece unless you're compelled to do so. So I would simply retreat somewhere, and then only when he forces me to do I take this, and then I'm taking it with my rook. And he would be a fool to not try to keep his rook on the board. If he trades rooks, it's over. So he has to keep his rook on the board somewhere. The bot says to trade, but that's wrong. If you're going to have any hopes of hanging in there, you need an attacker. If you play this, it's just over. The bishop covers the promotion square if you're only passed pawn. You can literally let him work his king up this way and his pawn up this way while you're working your own king, picking off these pawns, right? As soon as he promotes and you give up your bishop for that new queen, meanwhile, you've knocked these off with your king, and you've got 2 more pawns that are coming up the board. So the bot doesn't know what it's talking about here. The point is it's hoffnungslos, and that's why Pilnik resigned. So until next time, have a great day and play some great chess. Bye now.